Welcome to the first episode of the Douglas Social Credit Podcast. My name is Dr. Oliver Heydorn, and I'm joined today by William Waite, who is a long-time social creditor from New South Wales. So I myself am the founder and director of the Clifford Hugh Douglas Institute for the Study and Promotion of Social Credit, which is a Canadian not-for-profit organization looking at the ideas of the British engineer, Major C.H. Douglas. C.H. Douglas was born in 1879 and died in 1952, and he is the founder of the original social credit movement. So I'll have Will introduce himself, and then we will get on to the topic of today.
Thanks, Oliver. My name's Will. I'm talking from New South Wales. I started reading social credit material in my late teens. And I write the blog at Alternatives Exist, which is attached to the peoplescredit.com.au site. I've been interested in the topic for a long time. I think it's very important, and I think that there is widespread ignorance on the part of the public about extremely vital issues to how a social organisation operates, government, and especially the financial system. So, we're trying to shine a light into these areas and hopefully propose some alternatives to the dysfunctional system that we have now.
Right. So today we thought that we should start by pointing out that Douglas Social Credit has nothing in common whatsoever with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, social credit. So when we talk about Douglas Social Credit, we are not talking in any way, shape, or form about the system that's been called social credit that's been recently introduced in China by the Communist Party. So the message is that there are two social credits. We have to disambiguate this term social credit. The social credit we're talking about originated in 1917. That's when C.H. Douglas started writing on what became known as social credit during the 1920s, whereas this Chinese social credit is something which originated in ideas and pilot projects in the early 2000s, and the system that's now called the social credit system was introduced in around 2014. So these are two entirely different things chronologically. Also, where did Douglas Social Credit start, Will?
Douglas wrote his first article, The Delusion of Superproduction, in 1917. And then, as you said, it took the name social credit in 1924. It began with a look at the relationship between the group and the individual. Douglas felt that there was a tendency for the group to dominate the individual, especially by large institutions. And at that time, it was big government, big finance, the labour movement, etc. And he felt that the primacy of the individual was needed to be the focus of our social organisation, and the Douglas Credit proposals aim to achieve that objective.
Right. So Douglas was a British engineer, and lived in the UK. He had worked in various parts of the world, and as a result of his writings, there was this enormous, significant social credit movement that spread all throughout the Commonwealth, and also into some non-Commonwealth countries like the United States, Japan, etc. We even had social credit governments in Alberta and British Columbia at one time. Some of those governments held on to power for many decades. After the 1962 election in Canada, there were about 30 odd social credit MPs in the federal parliament. So, philosophically, like as you were describing, and also geographically, the social credit we're describing it's got nothing to do with the Communist Party of China. It's got nothing to do with China, period. And now, it's one thing to recognize that these were two very different ideas and two very different movements involving, different people and occurring in different spans of time. But we need to go one step further and recognize that not only is Douglas social credit, not only is it historically and ideologically different from the CCP social credit, it's actually, in a certain sense, it's actually the very opposite. So this is where things start to get a bit interesting. The fundamental idea in Douglas's notion of social credit, or one of the fundamental ideas anyway, was that we need to empower the individual, whether that's financial empowerment, economic empowerment, political empowerment. We need to give the individual real sanctions so that they can crack the whip on politicians, on bureaucrats, on business people, anyone who occupies a position of power in society. We need to put those people under a microscope and also under the gun, metaphorically speaking, so that whatever they do, it's in line with the common good, and it's in line with what the people who make up society, with what they want and what actually delivers satisfactory results to them. Now, the CCP system, as I understand it, they have basically taken that model and turned it on its head 180 degrees, because in the CCP model, it's not the individual that's important, it's the policy of the Communist Party. So the state monitors what people are doing, and depending on whether their behavior aligns with state objectives, with CCP objectives, they will reward or punish the citizens. So
well, it's a very finely tuned method of control, isn't it?
Yes,
what's
that's
happening
right.
in China.
That's right.
It's obviously the purpose of it is to increase the influence and power and control of the government over the citizenry. And of course, that's completely inverse to what Douglas would have wanted, and what we propose as social creditors.
Right. So it's quite diabolical in a sense, because it's one thing for them to appropriate the name social credit to describe something that's different from the original, but this is so different, it's actually an inversion. It's the very opposite of what C.H. Douglas had in mind. We might spend just a little bit of time explaining what Douglas meant by social credit, right? So social credit actually has a very specific meaning. And once you understand what Douglas had in mind, it will become even clearer that the original social credit actually has nothing in common with the CCP, the more recent CCP counterfeit. So I might ask you, Will, just to explain a bit more, in Douglas's sense, what's social credit?
So the definition of the social credit is the power of people in association to get intended results. And all it really is acknowledging that there is a very real power that accrues to people in associations when they cooperate. And it's this power that is the basis of what societies become capable of. I suppose that the social obviously refers to association, and the credit refers to it's from the Latin credere, which means to trust or believe, and it refers to a trust between people in the same society. So when you have trust and cooperation, you get this very real power to increase the quality or quantity of things you can do. And that's what Douglas referred to as the social credit. And the study of social credit is about how we maximize the social credit. How do we maximize the social credit for the benefit of the individuals in society? So there's obviously something like the Communist Party. It seeks to maximize the social credit, if you like, for the benefit of the Chinese Communist Party. So we see this across the whole world now. Really, we have these very large organizations that are able to sort of siphon off this power of the social credit, or tax it, or charge interest on it, or by whatever means, and they're able to siphon off all this value and bring it to their own positions to increase their control and their wealth. And ultimately, if it gets too heavy, it ends up destroying the social credit, because people don't trust each other and people don't cooperate freely with each other for their own benefit. So it's kind of, the more taxing or the heavier or more centralized power becomes, the more likely it is to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, if you like. And I think that's probably why we do see the collapse of these tyrannies throughout history, because people just, there's no value being generated for the people in the society.
Right. Yeah, I was going to add that with social credit and this phenomenon that you've described, and with what the CCP have done, they're actually, as you say, in a position where they're eroding real social credit as time goes on, because in a society that is so regimented, where the government's spying on you, assigning you a score, and then rewarding or punishing you based on your behavior, what's that going to do to creativity? What's that going to do to any kind of novelty or unrehearsed developments, any kind of authentic progress, when people feel so kind of straitjacketed by the social and political system? And so they're actually destroying a social credit. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, authentic progress is no longer the objective. The objective is to appease the surveillance state, I suppose. And you can't do both, because authentic progress is pretty hard. And if you're preoccupied by what your political rulers or your financial rulers or whoever are thinking, then you're not going to make much political progress. Authentic progress.
Yeah. There's another point we probably should make at this juncture, and that is that we're not in possession of any document to prove this. But if you just look at it mathematically in terms of the chances of this happening, how likely is it that the CCP would accidentally or coincidentally choose the name social credit that existed previously, and that described not only a different outlook and system, but an outlook and system that is the very opposite of what they have now implemented? So, as I say, we can't prove it in any documentary way, but it seems that the choice of the term social credit by the CCP was quite deliberate. Why would they do this? Or why would the forces that control the CCP behind the scenes, why would they deliberately appropriate the name social credit? And we can only think that the reason they did this was to bury the real social credit, to confuse people about Douglas social credit, because if Douglas's ideas were finally understood and disseminated throughout the world, that would be the end of oligarchic power. That would be the end of any kind of tyrannical power, because, of course, the financial system is the engine that drives all of this increasing centralization of power in every field of human activity. So Douglas is actually the antidote to the centralization of power. Douglas social credit is the antidote to every movement, every political, economic, financial movement that seeks to dispossess individual people and put an unelected, unaccountable oligarchy in charge, where they're in a position to feast on the increment of association. Maybe you have some thoughts you want to add to that.
Well, maybe they've done it deliberately. Maybe they believe that the Communist Party actually represents the highest expression of the social credit. Like maybe they think what's good for because the Communist Party in their eyes is the most important thing, this political entity, isn't it? And maybe they think that the well-being of the people is synonymous with the well-being of the Communist Party. That could be something too.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right that Douglas social credit is the antidote to these totalitarian schemes, whether they be political or financial. I mean, I think that there's probably some envy in the West amongst globalists, as some envy about what the Chinese have done there. I mean, I think that there are people who would like to do this in the West as well, but they have to go in a more roundabout way to do it. And I think that the centralization of power in the West has got to the point now where we are looking at a sort of, the dominating class taking more control than they ever have done before over a wider area.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's probably a good introduction to Douglas social credit by, highlighting what it's not, right? We'll repeat it again. When we're talking here about Douglas social credit, it's got nothing to do with this much more recent phenomenon, the CCP social credit. In fact, what we're talking about is something that can only rightly be described as being the very opposite of what the CCP have established, and which seems to be in the process of being rolled out as a model for the rest of the world. So I think we might leave it there. But we will continue to have discussions on a variety of other topics related to Douglas social credit. Before we sign off, Will, can you give out our websites?
So Oliver's behind a website, www.socred.org. And there's one in Australia, which is thepeoplescredit.com.au. We're both reachable there. There's a lot of material there. Oliver has a YouTube channel there's 30 animations there which describe different aspects of social credit, and it's a good way to get into the topic. So go and check that out.
Yeah, so we look forward to your comments. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you all again shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.